1.6 million. With one-on-one coaching, business coach Kim Argetsinger made it happen. And in this episode, she's about to show you how she did it, so you can too. Kim, so excited to have you here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited that I showed up twice today for this.
Yeah, we were talking beforehand. You were so excited you showed up an hour early. So I'm excited we get to do this now, and I've definitely done that before as well. So I've been following you for years, actually, like on the periphery. I remember seeing your name popping up in the Coaching Jungle Facebook group a few years back, and it's a testament to the power of consistency. And you've been showing up for so long, and I remember seeing your name pop up in comments on other people's stuff, and I remember checking you out. You've just been in my world for years. I love your approach. I love your thoughts on scale, so I'm excited that we get to dive in today. One thing that's super interesting to me about your journey is I don't know many actresses that end up becoming business coaches. So tell me a little bit more about that backstory, and what was the winding series of steps that led you from being an actor in New York to starting as a business coach and now running a very profitable, successful business coaching business?
I think it's funny because on the surface, it does not seem like that makes any sense. And it's definitely the Steve Jobs quote, you can't connect the dots looking forward, only looking backward. I think as I explain some of this, you'll see how much, in many ways, it, at least to me, makes a lot of sense. So how did I get here? So I actually started in college studying psychology. And let me rewind the tape a little bit. I have a father who is a race car driver, and he had a 50-year career as a race car driver. And so I grew up watching someone pursue their passions, make money from their passions, and tell me day in and day out, you can make money doing whatever you put your mind to, follow your dreams, follow your heart. So this was sort of like just the messaging I got growing up. And when I went into college, I had two passions: acting. So I was studying acting outside of school, and I'm just obsessed with the human brain and how the mind works and what makes us tick and what compels us to take action. And so psychology is what I got my degree in. And what I realized studying psychology is acting is all about human behavior and studying people and what makes them tick and what causes us to connect or to have a certain reaction or a certain response. Good acting is listening. Good acting is being present. Good acting is responding to what's in front of you instead of thinking about what's happening 5 steps down the road or coming in with a pre-planned way of doing something, which is essentially what coaching in business is. So I got my degree in psychology, and I had a path to choose, get my PhD or move to LA to pursue acting. And at that time, acting is what lit me up the most. And I had my dad's voice in my head. So I picked up, moved to LA, and did that for 10 years. Was in 12 indie films, 12 commercials, got to go to South Africa to do a film. It was amazing until it wasn't. Something, we'll probably talk about this in different ways, but I am a weirdo, maybe not a weirdo, but I love to work. I love my work. And I hit a day acting where I got material for an audition, and I was annoyed that I had to do this really great opportunity. And that was the day I decided I did not want to become a jaded actress. I pretty much quit right then and there. And without making this too long a story, picked up, moved to New York City to start over, thought I wanted to work in advertising, got a job in advertising, marketing, and kind of fell into coaching through a conversation in a roundabout way and just fell in love with it. It was sort of all the dots connecting, and started as a very general life coach, I think as many of us do, doing mindset work. And one of my first clients came to me, was an entrepreneur and scaled to $1 million during our time together. She was at about 6 figures at the time. And I noticed I was just attracting a lot of business owners and helping them make money. And I realized, I'm actually kind of good at this business thing. And looking back, acting is you're running a small business. You are marketing and branding yourself. You have to get an agent. You have to sell yourself in auditions. It is this much talent and this much marketing and sales. And so I just saw how all of that was really transferable, and very long way of saying here we are. So I think in some ways it makes more sense than it sounds. But I think on the surface, it makes no sense at all.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear that. I mean, I actually have a background in entertainment as well. I was in the music industry before I started as a business coach. And when I was in middle school, I was a singer-songwriter, and I was playing shows all around my neighborhood. And I had this big presence on MySpace at the time. And I was learning how to market through selling my own music and through sending like cold DMs on MySpace, trying to figure out the right subject lines to put in the messages to get people to listen to my music. And it's fascinating how these like non-traditional paths end up becoming so relevant in the work that we do. I'm curious if you think back to that journey as an actress, like, is there maybe one or two specific things that have really informed the work that you do, or that lessons that you take from that world that you've kind of integrated into the work that you do as a business coach?
Honestly, there's so many. What you were speaking to here, one of the things that comes up for me is just the willingness to really own your work, advocate for yourself, and I don't like the word hustle, maybe a healthy hustle, but to go out and essentially sell. I got my agent the same way you're talking about with those cold DMs, by doing my research and reaching out to people and figuring out. I remember figuring out my email subject line and how to position myself as I was one of many. One of the things that really stands out to me in business now and that I support clients with quite a bit is how important it is for us to differentiate. It is loud and crowded out there and everybody's saying and doing the same thing. When you're acting, at the time I was a brunette, there was 1,000 new brunettes my age showing up who technically had the skill set every single day. How do you stand out? How do you differentiate without compromising your values or without being something that you're not? I think on a sales perspective, one of the things that I really take from the acting world is both the willingness to be rejected, and not that you want to be rejected, but I think there's just something to being willing to put yourself out there in a big enough way where you're open to hearing a no. And what we were talking about earlier, so much of acting is being present and listening. And I think so much of business, sales, coaching is actually dropping in to listen to the person in front of you and what they're actually telling you, not what they're saying on the surface. So I could probably go on and on here, but there's quite a lot of parallel and takeaways from that world.
Yeah, powerful. So you talked about this idea of differentiating, and this is a question I get quite a bit, and something so many people are thinking about, especially with AI now and the amount of content and noise that is. I mean, when I first got started in 2016, really like my first official online coaching business, it was so much easier in many ways. I knew a lot less, but there wasn't as much happening, or it felt like there wasn't as much happening. So many people are wondering, how do I stand out? How do I differentiate myself? So what are some of the insights that you can share on that? What's been effective for your clients? How do you do that in today's world?
I'm pausing because I don't want to just give you the like canned answer. One of the things I think you talk about this as well. I think we are moving into such a time of personal branding, and not your color and your logos, but I think people more than ever want to know that they are buying and working with people who have aligned values. And so I think we can differentiate simply by getting more clear on who we are, which in some ways is the biggest, hardest question ever, what our values are as a business owner, and really learning how to communicate that. I call it strategic vulnerability, but I think there's a way in which, how can we be vulnerable in a strategic way in which it is still serving a purpose of giving a lesson or aiding to our message, not coming in with all of our messy stuff, but showing more of who we are, our thought leadership, and how we've come to create the results or to support our clients. And in many ways, it's just being ourselves. But I mean, this goes back to acting. In many ways, acting is not acting. It's how can you just drop in, listen, and be the part. But sometimes that's the hardest acting work. I think as a business owner, sometimes it's so hard because that asks us to strip everything and show people who we are. And I think it's both the easiest and the hardest because we want to put on all the masks.
Yeah, the hiding piece. Absolutely. I mean, I think you're spot on. And the thing that gets in the way of that being all the layers. So when you're working with clients on that, and there's a fear of showing up and sharing more of who they are, how do you work with people on that? And what are some tools that people might take to be able to maybe move past some of the resistance that they might have in order to show the world more of who they really are?
Yeah, I think one of the first things, honestly, is creating awareness that we are hiding. I think so many of us don't realize how much I call it hiding in plain sight, of how much we really do hide behind our mask and how much we do sort of perform for the world. I think a lot of us have just been conditioned. I'm constantly finding new ways where I'm like, oh, I didn't realize, like, here's a way I'm still hiding. And then the work I'm doing with clients, and I think for everyone, one of the things I like to think about is when we're hiding, if we just even think about the word, we're doing that because we're trying to create safety. We don't think it's safe, essentially. And so I'm always looking at, how do we create safety? What is that fear? If you show up and share more, what are you actually worried about? And how can we create safety? Not how do we avoid it? Not how do we make sure it doesn't happen? But if that does happen, how can we see we can handle it? Or it's not actually a big deal, or we'd be able to navigate it. I think that is your superpower as an entrepreneur. Does that make sense?
Totally. The safety piece is so important. I love this phrase. I forget where I heard this idea of like these barriers or these resistances being like false protections. They're pieces or parts of us that are trying to help. They're trying to keep us safe. And so many times there's the judgment that we like pile on top of it. I know for me, it's like, I notice the thing and then I'm like, oh, why am I doing the thing? I have the layer of judgment on top of it. But it's like, no, thank you. That part of me that's trying to keep me safe. And maybe that's not super helpful and useful in this moment. We can kind of set that aside and create, an internal sense of safety that allows us to move forward. But those are useful things in certain contexts. And I love that framing around safety because it's so important. So I want to get a little bit more specific here. Like, can you maybe share like an example of this from your own business experience, maybe a pattern or a way that you've shown up in your marketing or messaging, something that you've become aware of like relatively recently that you're maybe working on moving past or shifting in your own messaging or your own content?
Yes, I'm pretty open about this in my content, but without going too far down the rabbit hole, I have quite a lot of trauma around basically showing up and getting hate and getting bullied and just bad things happening and the bottom falling out. So I have quite a huge pattern. This is something I've worked through at every single level of business. I worked through this to make my first 6 figures. I'm working through this now to continue to scale at multi-6 figures. And it's just really owning my success, owning that things are good, owning that, the money I make, owning how well things are working. I call it look at me content. And I think in some ways that can sound sort of like, really? Like, why is that hard? But for me, what I find, and I find this for quite a few of my clients who either have trauma or have just people-pleasing patterns, I think it feels safer to be what I call strategically vulnerable in terms of sharing the hard things, right? It's easier for me to talk about, here are the ways I've struggled, or here are the hard things I've gone through, because that's such a way we can get then I don't have to hate you for your success. I think some of the hardest vulnerability is actually saying, things are pretty good. Like, I'm doing really well. And so that is an edge I'm continuing to work. And it is like prickly, and like my voice is probably quivering. Like, it is prickly in every way, but I also know it's how I can best support clients. I also know, that's the work for us as entrepreneurs. So it's also exciting.
Hey friend, hope you're enjoying this episode of the podcast. And before we get back to it, if you're an established online business owner who's serious about unlocking your next level of income and impact and growth, I want you to watch my free $1 Million Online Business Training, where I walk through a 4-step roadmap I've personally used to sell well over $1 million of coaching, consulting, and courses online. It's going to make the journey of growing your business so much easier. I want to give this to you for free. All you got to do to access it is go to jasonmoss.com/growth. That's jasonmoss.com/GROWTH to get free access to this training right now. Now back to the episode. Yeah, I so resonate with that. Like so there was a thread a while back online that I found. This is like when you get to, you start having a really big presence and people start talking about you online, right? And there was this thread of people that I found, talking about, they were like, what do you think of Jason Moss? And someone chimed in and they were like, he's all about the money. He doesn't, all he wants to do is make more money. And there were a couple other people who were like, yeah. And I am still working through that. Like the response that I had, because so much of messaging and content, especially as a business coach, is talking about the wins, and you're sharing your own lifestyle and your own success as a way. I see it as like, it's strategic from a marketing standpoint, but it's also like creating a possibility for other people to be able to show others like, hey, I've created this and you can create this too. Like this is a possibility for you. But experiencing that and processing that for me has still been, I noticed after that period of time that there was a part of me that really like closed off from sharing a lot of the success and said, oh, I don't want to be perceived as this like arrogant, money obsessed business coach. So I'm just not going to talk about those things. And so in some ways, I think, what you're sharing, I can totally resonate with. Obviously your story is unique and your own experience around it is unique, but I find it super common for a lot of the coaches, consultants, people that I work with. I mean, especially in the business space, like we have so much resistance around talking about money, and there's so many stories that we have around just sharing and not being boastful and not, talking too much about ourselves, that these are things that are super common, I think, for so many people that I mentor and work with. So I would imagine that we're probably not alone in that.
I think it's so common, and I think it's so human. I mean, as humans, we want to connect and fit in. I think the challenge is as business owners and as thought leaders, in many ways, we're not meant to fit in, right? We are showing a different path. But I personally think the thing that helps me, if this is helpful for people to hear, because I think almost every single one of my clients goes through this in some way, shape, or form. I just remember two things. What do I actually know to be true? Because I've gotten my share of comments as well. And what I have found to be really interesting is when I get comments, usually they don't ever sting as much as I thought they were going to, because I just inherently know what's true and I can come back to that. And the other thing I like to remember is what's important for us. I think as business owners, money is the language of business. Being able to talk about money, share about money. Money is a beautiful resource and tool. I want to be, especially as not that this isn't true for you also, but as a female and as a woman, and just being in a space where that is something that we haven't always had access to, I want to be a voice for that. So I don't know if that's helpful for people to hear, because I think it's so common. But sometimes if we can find what's more important for us on the other side of the fear, I think it can help us to show up even when it feels super, super prickly to share those things.
Yeah. And so much of what you shared, I talk about this quite a bit with my clients, the shift from self to other, because I find almost all resistance is rooted in a preoccupation with self. And so when I'm feeling like I don't want to talk about my own success, it's because I think it's all about me. But what I heard you just say was seeing my own story as a way of empowering other women allows me to kind of get out of my own way. And that's such a powerful reframe to be able to kind of move the focus from this like preoccupation with self to how does this serve, which melts away a lot of the resistance I find for most people.
Yeah. I have another client who does, I want to be mindful to be keeping her work confidential, but she does quite sensitive work. And this is what we've talked about a lot. It's if she can get past it being about her, and also just remember, as humans, we just project all of the time. So any comments tend to be someone else's projections. But if she can think about it more in terms of how is this of service to help people in a really challenging, kind of trauma-based topic, the more she can actually be of service and do the work she feels she's meant to do in this world. And I found that's really been powerful for her to not feel necessarily comfortable, but to feel comfortable in the discomfort of sharing more of her story.
Yeah, I think that's
you hit the nail on the head.
Super common theme for all aspects of business, whether it's sales or marketing or content. It shows up in pretty much every sphere. So I want to shift gears a little bit, because one of the things we were talking about before we started this was this idea of scaling smarter heading into the new year. I think a lot of people are thinking about this, myself included. You just did a big reflection on 2024. I've been checking out some of your reels and talking about some of the things that you have let go of. Tell me more about this idea of scaling smarter, and what are some of the specific insights or takeaways that maybe you realized from your own kind of reflection over 2024, things that you're changing moving into 2025 to be able to do this in your business?
Yeah. And thank you for asking, because I'm pretty obsessed about, I think we talk about working smarter, not harder, but I think it's scaling smarter, not harder, because I think so many of us get scaling confused, and we end up at least in our online space, the conversation we're just having about talking about money and sharing about money, I think we can get really caught up in just chasing that top line revenue. And what I've just seen with a lot of clients who hire me, how often that can have us in a place where we either don't like the work we're doing, we're working way too hard, we're over leveraged, and or we're not paying ourselves in a way that is commensurate to that top line revenue. So for me, it really is, how do you build a more simple business and really look at the data and really look at what is that 80-20 that is driving your revenue, and really set your business up in a way that's profitable, where you're also making money in the way you want to, and you're setting yourself up to take home pay. I can pause, but I know you had a question about what did I notice myself that contributed to that, but I don't want to just
tell me about.
Go down like a rabbit hole.
I love what you're talking about.
Okay.
I think like I've also kind of been going through this series of insights around this, which is a lot of what was behind the shift to one-to-one. We definitely talk about that, but
I would love to hear.
Tell me about your business and what this looks like for you today.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know if we talked about this at the beginning, but I have an all one-on-one business model, and I've very intentionally stuck with one-on-one and decided to scale that, even though I have been told by our industry year after year that you can't scale a one-on-one model and that you won't make enough money doing that. And it's been interesting because I think it's both something I have to kind of redo the mindset work around. But this year was really interesting because I never looked at this, but it wasn't my first year that this happened, but I pay myself multi-six figures. So I make multi-six figures, but I pay myself that. And it was one of the times where I was landing, I was like, oh, isn't that interesting? Yeah, sure. I'm not making 5 times that top line, but I'm paying myself just as much as many other business models. And it just had me thinking about what are some of the reasons for that, aside from the fact that I love one-on-one. But it is so much the simplicity of the business. And this year in particular, we also increased our profit margins. And a lot of that was just really looking at how much shit were we doing that was working and was effective, but that we didn't need to do, or that we were overspending on, or that if you have a one-on-one model in particular, there's only so many clients you can work with. So at a certain point, yes, it's great to build your audience and you want to future-proof your business and keep your pipeline full, but you only need to do that so much. And so just really looking at, I don't know if this is an appropriate way to say it, but almost like trimming the fat and just really seeing what are those few money makers, like those drivers, and leaning into those and basically doing less better. And what I found this year is not only did that make us more profitable, but it is such a fucking edge for me. I don't know if you'll relate to this, but I like to work and I have the hard work gene, and it is so uncomfortable for me to sit on my hands and be like, okay, is that like, we good? Like, I don't need to like hustle so I don't need to like create more content. It's a very strange place to be in, but that's also, I think, what working smarter or scaling smarter, not harder, is all about.
Yeah, there's so much of that. I can certainly relate to that. The sense that the amount of hours that I work, there's a part of my mind that says I need to be working hard in order to create results. And that has been a story that I've been working with and trying and really have made a lot of progress on dismantling. But it's still sticky in certain areas. So to give me some specifics on like, what have you let go of in your business? You mentioned like trimming the fat. What are some things that you're not doing heading into 2025 that you were doing in 2024?
So one of the big things we let go of last year, so in 2024, I still have to get used to saying 2024, 2025, I had a podcast that I loved recording it. We went to 195 episodes. It was absolutely filling our pipeline and generating clients. So in all senses and purposes, like, it was doing all the things it was meant to do. But I also have a thriving Facebook group where I go live every week. And I was sent, my lives and my podcast served the same function in my marketing strategy. And so one of the things we let go of last year was the podcast, because it just cost us more to produce. And, you know, you have a podcast. I think a podcast in some ways takes more effort to, because you're on a separate platform than in a Facebook group that's already kind of thriving and live. So we dropped that and the expenses around that, which also freed up my time so that I could put more energy into the lives in terms of being a little bit more intentional. Because one of the big things I noticed, and this is what I'm taking into 2025, is when you're trying to do all of the things and when you're working harder and you have that, I got to work hard to make more money mentality, you start to phone things in and you spread yourself thin and you are not thinking through things as intentionally as you could. And I think for many of us who are good at what we do, we can coast and get a certain way on, I don't know, kind of good enough. And I don't want to make a any sort of a argument for perfection or anything like that. But I just see such a difference in slowing down and just being a little bit more intentional and, just thinking a little bit more. That's what thought leadership is. And so going into 2025, I'm not necessarily dropping anything, but I'm really being mindful of not overbooking myself with one-on-one clients, because I can do that sometimes, and keeping my roster at a good place so that I'm cultivating the CEO white space thinking time to actually think and to have space for my thought leadership. And that kind of goes back to our branding and messaging conversation, because I think that's really the lifeblood of my business.
So something you just said is super fascinating to me. Because I think about this a lot around like what to let go of. And what I hear, which is super interesting, because a lot of people talk about letting go of things that aren't moving the needle and, okay, focus on the 80-20 and all of that. But I'm also hearing that like the podcast was working.
Yeah, it was working great.
Like, talk to me about the thought process behind how you decided to let go of that. And I'm hearing that there was like a desire to want to double down on fewer things and do things really well. But also like that's hard to let go of. I think for a lot of business owners,
hard.
Like, yeah.
Like, just to be completely transparent, like it was not easy. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I hate this or it's not working. It was like actually quite like I don't know, like kind of a heartbreak to let go of. I have this is kind of a side tangent, but I have a course idea that I'm obsessed with, and it's not being done in the industry. And I think it would be really great. And I started building it last year, and I had to let it go for the same reasons. And I grieved it. Like, I grieved the podcast as well. So just to be transparent on that. But the thought process around that is, I time track about once a quarter. I time track where my time goes. I have my team do the same. And I was just seeing how much time was going into my podcast. And I was also just noticing things like we started showing up on Instagram to do lives, reels more. And kind of when I was sitting down to do a podcast, where my energy was at. And instead of coming in with an intention or having something I really wanted to share, I was kind of doing this thing. I'm sure we've all done this, where you're like, just kind of winging it. Like, what am I going to talk about? I'm just going to hit record. And like, I can wing shit to a certain degree, but that just only, it's not that it only gets you so far. I guess that's just not the work I want to be putting out there. I don't want to overthink things, but I do want to be intentional. And so I just noticed that. I noticed how, things were just getting kind of done in the cracks of time instead of feeling spacious. And in 2021, I overbooked myself. I had 29 one-on-one clients. And I will never not show up for my clients. But what that meant and what I really saw and learned from that year, made great money, served my clients really well. I didn't necessarily burn out, but my marketing, my thought leadership, my creating something new really suffered. And I didn't see an impact of that right away. But about a year down the road, I really just saw how that impacted just so much in our pipeline and just our business. And so I think all of that kind of then going into 2024, noticing, wait, this starts to smell like that. And I've just promised myself I won't let that happen again. I think that made it easier to make that decision or to pay attention to that.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
It does. I mean, like the intention and the energy behind something being as important of an indicator of whether or not you should continue it as what the results are on the outside is really powerful. It's something I think about a lot too. Like, what energetically, like, how am I feeling when I'm showing up in this wing of my business, and how can I create something that not only looks good on the outside, but also allows me to show up feeling like I actually want to be here.
I mean, that's kind of why I started. I'm sure you too, but I'm like, that's why I started this business. That's my message. So if I'm not living my message, something's got to change. But also just from a cautionary tale, just from a like actual business and numbers tale, it was affecting, like, it was working, but it still costs money and time and energy. My time is money in terms of I have a one-on-one model. So if I'm using a bunch of time for one thing, I can't serve clients and make money during that time. Or if we're paying more for that, that cuts into my profitability. And if I'm spread thin and not paying attention in a kind of future thinking way with my marketing, that won't catch up now. But I do think for all of us, that will catch up with a business 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road. So, I mean, there's also, there's a feel good and a financial element to it.
Yeah, there's the leading and the lagging indicators, right?
Yeah.
And the leading is often like how we feel and the intention, and then the lagging is the revenue and the clients and all the stuff that happens on the back end. So on a selfish level, I am super curious to ask you about this, because you know this, I recently completely shut down our group program and migrated our entire business to one-on-one, partially because I've been really inspired by your model and from getting to experience, and we're new friends, but getting to experience your business on a deeper level and the work that you do, partially just because I started to realize, I think probably many of the lessons that you've shared, some of them in this podcast are things that I'm realizing in my own business. And I'm curious if you can share a little bit more about like what your experience has been with that kind of model. Most people, I think, will still have the belief of the only way to scale is to have a group program, is to do like what we did with Accelerator, where we had this, large group program where we brought a bunch of people through it. So I'm imagining there's probably some myth busting to do there. And if you can maybe speak to that, like you're running a multi 6-figure business, you're, making multiple 6 figures in profit, doing super well. You've been fully booked for years on end. Tell me a little bit more about that transition and that shift for you and what you've learned from having this model for the past few years in your business.
Yeah, I'm going to preface by saying I think groups and masterminds and other models can be wonderful as well. So just because I think this is the best and this is what you've transitioned to, just for anyone listening, I want to be mindful. I have plenty of clients who have other models and are scaling in beautiful ways, but I'm also really excited for you because I'm clearly biased and think a one-on-one model is the best. So my thought process, or I guess let me come back to your question here. And your question is more just overall, like how did I think about this?
I want to know, what your experience has been like, what you've learned from the past few years of running this, and thinking about the person who might be listening to this and thinking, okay, I've been told this story that the way to scale my business is to move to group, because that's what most people do.
Yeah.
Maybe creating some possibility for that person.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. So what I would just always think about is that scaling really just means that your revenue, your growth is outpacing your energy and your expenses. So literally scaling smarter, not harder. And so I think it's easy for us to think the only way we do that is with a traditional scalable model, which is serving one to many, because in theory, you're using fewer hours to serve more people to make more money. And that is one model you can do that with. But if we actually just look at what scaling really is, it's essentially more take home pay. It's more profit, not the top line revenue number. So with a one-on-one model, you might not make as much top line revenue as someone who has a huge membership or who has a huge group program, but you will very likely take home the same, if not more. And I know this because I have peers and many clients who are making far more money on paper than me, but we make the same or I take home more than them. And not to make anyone wrong, but just to lay out the numbers there, because a one-on-one model is generally high ticket. It is generally very, very low cost in terms of what it costs to maintain that model. It is very sustainable. I mean, I frankly think it's the easiest business model. People are like, I can't believe you do this. I'm like, I'm cheating. This is literally the easiest business model. You don't need a huge audience. I do a lot of marketing more because I care about sharing my message, and I guess keeping my business, sustainable in the future. But you really don't have to do that much marketing. If you have a good client base, my clients, many of them have been with me for 3, 4, 5 years. I mean, at any given time, I've maybe got a spot I'm selling. That's it. So most of the time I don't even have that much to sell. So just for anyone hearing this, in many ways, it's easier in terms of, I think it's a more sustainable model. And I think it's something that, frankly, as we're moving into a season in our industry where it's more saturated and ad costs, we just started running ads. Our ads are actually pretty low, but I've heard the ad costs are going up. I think a lot, and just with AI and what that's doing for kind of more how-to content, I think it's actually something people are always going to pay for and crave, where things like memberships and courses are, I think, just harder to actually create a profitability around. I'm going to pause because I could just go on and on about this, and I want to make sure I'm not talking too much.
You're preaching. I mean, so we've been talking so much about this on my podcast, just what's changing and some of the shifts that you highlighted, the shift to AI, and how, my belief is moving in the future, intimacy is becoming something that we desire so much more because we live in a world where it's more and more a rarity. And my first coaching business I built to 6 figures was online courses primarily. And people not that they don't buy courses today, but like if you don't have a community component or some kind of like intimacy component on the back end, they're much harder to sell than they used to, be 10 years ago when I was doing this. So I love so much of what you shared. And the other piece around like the lifetime value is something that honestly, this has been a big shift for us, because when I looked at, and I was always working with one-to-one clients, but we had this big group program, we took over 140 people through it. And when I looked at the actual lifetime value of the clients that I was working with one-to-one versus people that I would take through the group program, it was 3 to 4 times more, because people would stick around. Because when they're more connected to you, they're generally going to have better experiences. People want intimacy on a deeper level. It's a more desirable offer. Versus if you're running a large group program, oftentimes it places a lot more dependency on filling the pipeline with new leads all the time. And to your point on ad spend rising and the cost of paid traffic becoming more expensive, I think a lot of people are reckoning with that model of let's just put more people in the front, because that might work for a while, but it becomes a very difficult game to play over a long period of time if you're not creating back-end recurring, some kind of model where people are actually sticking around for much longer. And that's been just my experience from this, which is part of what inspired me, in addition to seeing, your business and what you're doing to really shift our model to one-to-one.
I really agree. And again, I have plenty of clients I think a group program or a mastermind, you still get that in many ways that is one-on-one at scale for people who want that. And I think that can meet the same need. And there are courses that can still do well. So I don't want people who have courses to think that it can't.
Sure. But We're not saying burn down your business.
No, but I mean, with
like
a course, but with a course model, you are just playing the ads game at a certain degree if you want to scale in 2025, just to put it simply. And I think we were talking about differentiation. I think when you can create a one-on-one relationship, but also when you can support someone one-on-one, you and I are, I imagine, coaches because we love to coach and we want to actually impact people and help them create shifts and transformation and get results. Some sort of one-on-one component, whether it's one-on-one or one to a few in a group, tends to be the best way people are going to have that transformation, not just consuming information. Otherwise, all of us downloading everything in ChatGPT and all of the courses and all of the PDFs would be gazillionaires with six-pack abs, and that's just not the case. Totally. So, I think there's the differentiation, the profitability, but I think there's also the work itself and how that can actually support people getting an ROI from their investment.
Hey friend, hope you're enjoying this episode of the podcast. And before we get back to it, if you're an established online business owner who's serious about unlocking your next level of income and impact and growth, I want you to watch my free $1 Million Online Business Training, where I walk through a 4-step roadmap I've personally used to sell well over $1 million of coaching, consulting, and courses online. It's going to make the journey of growing your business so much easier. I want to give this to you for free. All you got to do to access it is go to jasonmoss.com/growth. That's jasonmoss.com/GROWTH to get free access to this training right now. Now back to the episode. So much of like the belief that I feel like this is dismantled for me. I've always had this tension between the desire for intimacy and the desire for scale, and feeling like these two things kind of are two separate things. Like I can only grow my business if I take away the thing that is actually the most meaningful thing for me, which has always been like the smaller, more intimate experiences. Like we ran this retreat in Boulder in June, I think it was this past year. It was like 12 entrepreneurs. One of my first in-person events, actually the first in-person event I'd ever done. And it was like the best thing I've ever done. Like I absolutely loved it. And I've always had this sense like I want to work with people in a very deep, intimate way. But I think being in the business space for a while, it's very easy to fall into that mindset of the only way for me to grow my business is to take that away. Yeah. And then you end up in like I did in a model where it was like, okay, this looks good on paper, but there's something missing for me. This doesn't feel like it's feeding that part of me that really desires to connect on a deeper level. So I love that you're creating this possibility for me and for other people through listening to this.
I appreciate you being like just sharing this as well and sharing your part of the journey. Because I think if it's helpful for everyone to hear, I'm also in our online space. I also have a human monkey mind. Every year I hit a point I could go through my notes to my coach where I have to have one conversation where I just need to reset because, you're with peers in a mastermind who are on paper, right? Have bigger businesses. And I support clients to do that. I know how the sausage is made, so to say. I know what I need to do if I want to create that. And it can be tough sometimes to keep your eyes on your own paper and to come back to that. So I appreciate you sharing that side of it as well. If this is helpful for people listening in terms of scaling one-on-one, I don't know for sure, but I think the way you're doing it is just charging a premium, which I think just remembering for scaling, sometimes the easiest way to scale is just to raise your rates. I mean, it sounds overly simple, but I think we think it has to be, have this huge new program. You could just raise your rates. And I use a revenue sharing model. So that's the way we scale one-on-one, which is a profit sharing model, which I'm happy to share about. But I think that's just also, I didn't know that existed before my coach had it. And that sort of opened up possibility for my brain as well.
I'm super curious about that. Tell me more about, because that wasn't something you had forever. This was something you've integrated more recently. Tell me more about what you've learned through that, shifting the way that you price to rev share in addition to like flat rate pricing.
And so just for context for anyone listening, I essentially charge a base rate that covers my time and my team's time. And then 10% of new revenue clients make while working with me, that they pay just over that time. So that is basically based on results. It's a way that I can have skin in the game and we can partner together. For me, it makes a lot of sense. It's how I've always paid my coach, but I'm an actress. That's how I paid my agent. I work in advertising. That's how we got paid as an agent. So it just makes a lot of sense to me. What I would say, what's interesting, I would say it is definitely not a model for everyone because I think there's a strategy to it in terms of choosing clients or being in a position where you can choose clients where this model really makes sense and who really want to show up to play the long game with you and work long term, because obviously clients who work with you for 4 years are going to be in a different place than, client results after 3 months and who want that long-term partnership, and who really want to scale. But I think outside of that, there's only so much you can control. And so most of us entrepreneurs are control freaks. And if you're someone who's like, I just want to scale and make more money, this is a bit of a long game. And it is something that, it really is up to your clients and what they do. And I think it requires quite a bit of just internal work around showing up to support clients and detaching from their results and detaching from trying to guide them towards what will make them more money or how is this going to affect me, and really detaching from that completely. So it has its pros and its cons. I personally love it, but I think a lot of people might not.
I would imagine that's got to be a difficult piece of it. And both that you're aligned, which is great, and that you're incentivized to really help someone grow, but also that so many of the things that create growth, I know for me, is like, it's the long-term stuff. So it's very easy to be like, oh, I can help you make more money next month. But are those always going to be the things that are going to help someone build a sustainable, profitable business 6 months, 12 months, 5 years down the line? Usually not. So you kind of hinted at this a little bit, but has that been, how have you navigated that?
Yeah, I would say
for yourself as a coach.
I don't know if this is the question you're asking, but I would say for me, honestly, I literally don't think about revenue share until the monthly stuff comes in. One of the reasons I love is it allows me to meet and work with clients who are scaling to $1 million and clients who are brand new to business. And I love working with clients at both stages. It's kind of like a sliding scale in that way. And so I never, with a new client, I'm thinking like, how do we hurry up and make you money? Or if one of my clients is scaling, like you're going through a pivot, right? And brings this to me and I'm like, oh, but that means we might have a temporary shift back before they make more and that's going to affect my revenue. I'm literally not ever, it sounds cheesy, but I'm always thinking about what's right for my client. But I think if this is helpful to hear, this is just the way my brain works with this and probably why this model works for me. I'm so available to make more money. I want to make more money. I would love to make more money, but I make enough money in my business that honestly, if I make more money, it's not going to change my life. I'm barely going to notice. I'm just going to invest more, which is cool. But so I just don't have that, I have that want without feeling like that pressure or that need.
Yeah. The intention without the attachment.
Yeah. And so that might just be even something to think about if you're someone who's thinking about a revenue share model. Can you detach in that way? And can you set your base rate up in a way where it covers your needs so that you don't feel like you want more, but you're not feeling really attached to more? I think that base rate is really important for that. Did that answer what you were asking?
It does, yeah. And I love that, just that framing around the desire without the attachment, which is, talk about this a lot with money mindset. Like, it's such an important key. And it's hard. It's hard to do. It's hard to detach. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. It's easier, I find, when you're making a lot of money.
I mean, let's be honest. It's way easier when you're making a lot of money. It's something I have to check myself. Like, again, just coming back to the online space, I'm with a lot of peers who make more on paper. It's easy to think like I should be making more so that I can prove to the online space that I'm making more, or whatever, the noise that gets into our head. And
totally,
I would be lying if I said that never came up. And so, I have to check myself on that stuff as well. But I always see like that's almost always ego or scarcity based on stuff that has nothing to do with money and more to do with just personal trauma shit and like nothing to do with money at all. And like when I can separate that out, I can see that it's a lot easier to attach.
It's not an easy thing to do. I mean, I've kind of gone through a version of this past year. I've been working with a mentor for the past 2 years, and 8-figure business owner, and hanging out in masterminds with people who are making 10 million plus a year. And I think I got super fixated in a way that I don't think was super healthy in my business. And we've been kind of at this like $500,000 a year mark for a while. But the past probably 6 months, I've been like, we're going to hit 7 figures. We're going to hit 7 figures. If you look at a lot of my content from like 6 months ago, I like talk about this quite a bit. But at a certain point, I realized like I really just needed to let go of that completely. And very much in the space of like, if it happens, great. Like if it doesn't, great. I'm happy right now. I don't need more money. What I really want is to serve and help people and have a good time. And the money has a great way of taking care of itself. Like in that mindset, I find the more attached I am to the goal of the thing, the more I get off course.
I imagine for someone listening, let me say this another way. I imagine if I had heard us talking about this 6 years ago, I would have rolled my eyes or been like, yeah, easy for you to say. Like, no, you need to like really be fixated on it. But I have just so seen that to be true. I was sharing my word of the year is fun. And I have found my resistance to fun is so often because I think I have to be serious and I have to be really focused on my goal. And that's the only way to get it. But the truth is, whenever I release the goal, because when we're fixated on a goal, that's actually scarcity. That's actually lack. That's actually saying, I need this. It needs to fill a hole. I don't have it. When we're having fun, right? We're in a place of I have enough. Everything is good. I'm doing what's in alignment. I'm doing what feels good. It is wild to me then how the money takes care of itself and just what shows up for us.
Yeah. And I love that frame around the fixation on the goal being rooted in lack. We talk about manifestation and all that. Like the letting go of that is trust. It's, I have all my needs. I have everything. Like, so I can let go of that. And paradoxically, like that is when we are able to attract so much more because we're not chasing something from a feeling of deficiency. And that's getting mirrored back to us in our experience. So tell me more about fun, because 2025, I love that. What inspired you to want to choose that as your word? And what does that mean for you heading into the new year?
I like to choose a word of the year that feels like an edge. And I feel like you have to be careful what you wish for. Do you choose a word of the year? Do you know the practice?
Yes, actually. We were partnered, Kimberly and I were talking about this. I think my word was faith for this year. Okay.
I've been doing this
I'm happy to share why, but...
Yeah, I would love to. Do you want to share
super curious about yours. Why don't you start and then I'll share.
Okay.
Because we're here for you.
Well,
people already listen to me. They've heard plenty of me.
It's nice to hear the both.
Yeah.
But I've been choosing a word of the year for 10 years. And what I've always found is you kind of have to be careful what you wish for, because if you just choose a fluffy sounding word, it's like your word is, if you actually use it as I use it as both a mantra and an intention, but really as a way to make decisions and to filter like what I'm doing through that word. And if you really do that, it is wild how it will just give you the lessons you really need. I had Bring the Joy the year I lost my father. And it was just like, man, the lessons that showed up for me around that. So I always try to choose a word that feels like a growth edge, but like a mindful growth edge. So I put quite a lot of thought into it. I was thinking I was going to choose unbothered, but I realized I'm quite unbothered by a lot of things now. So fun for me, I think for a lot of people, it sounds like a fluffy word. It is one of my biggest edges. I'm a very fun person. I have a lot of fun, but I am high achieving. I have high functioning PTSD. I'm wired to be driven. I've got the hard work gene. I don't know, all of the typical things you think of an eldest daughter, where it's just like, I'm super responsible and super like, yes, if we just do all the things right, perfectionism, like, right, we're going to get what we get. And I've done a lot of work to unpack that. But I noticed this past year how even just going on vacations, triggers me, right? Like, I'm sort of like, is it really okay if I just unplug, especially the one-on-one model? And like, my client's going to be okay. Will my business be okay? And how when I do the work to trust that I don't have to work so hard, or what we were talking about with the content and some of the things I let go with the podcast. And when I allow myself to share the things that are exciting to me, work with the clients I want to work with, do the things that are fun and unplug, I get new ideas. I attract people who are really aligned. The most wild, spontaneous, serendipitous manifestations show up. I mean, money shows. I had like a 28K day when I was unplugged, having the most fun probably I did all year. So it's both an edge, but I also see the benefit on the other side. So it is my challenge to myself this year to really use fun as a filter for everything I'm doing in business. And I think it's going to be both fun and really fucking hard.
Yeah, it's crazy how hard that is. I totally relate to that. Yeah, fun is an edge for me. Absolutely. Even just a conversation I have with my partner quite a bit. Like, let's have more fun. I've been telling you offline, it's been a tough month for us. We had a major flood in our home, and we're just like, a lot of it has felt like we're just kind of like holding on to the pieces while we put back our home, you know, because we've been in Airbnbs for the past few weeks, hopping back and forth while we, you know, basically redo the entire downstairs of our home. And it's a time when I think it's very easy not to have fun, but fun can be like a radical act. You know, it's not an easy thing to do, but it's so important, especially in times when things are hard.
Yeah. And I know we talked about this earlier, but I also just, sometimes the way to fun is also acknowledging the stuff that is just hard. Like, that's just hard to seeing you in that, and just really want to see you in that. And yeah, just so with the word fun, I mean, one of the things I was thinking about is I love my work. Like, fun is also not just like fucking off. Like, sometimes it's how do we make sure we're keeping that spark with the things that to someone else might not be fun. I'm sure to someone else, they don't want to be on one-on-one calls. But if I'm working with clients who are fun for me, even though I'm working hard, it doesn't feel like hard work, and it feels really fun. So I want to be mindful just for anyone listening. Like, I very much think we can even bring fun into to what can seem like a challenge.
Definitely. Yeah. And this all gets to be fun. Like, that's why we did this in the first place.
We picked this. I mean, like, I started thinking, like, how lucky are we that we live in a time where we can connect? Never met you in person. We connected because of the internet, and we get to share our ideas and work with humans we love and make great money and have lives that we've picked on our terms. Like, how fun.
It's a tremendous gift. And it's so easy, I think, to forget that in the day-to-day of what we get to do. But to step back and remember that is something that I think we can all benefit from, myself included. Because whatever level you're at, you know, there's always going to be the story that your mind tells you that you're not where you want to be, or, you know, this is hard, or this is a challenge. And the flip into fun, I think, is, and just gratitude as well, and what we're talking about. So, you were going to say something. I'm happy to share my context. I'm going to share one thought, but I want to hear what the one button I'll put on is, I just think if you can think of business as a game, because that's how business is fun for me, I think it makes business really fun. Just that's what came up when you were saying that. But I would love to hear, faith was your word of the year, like why you chose that, or did you pick a word for 2025? Yeah, so that's the word. And
I think that's for 2025.
That is, I forget 2024. I think 2024 was like balanced CEO or something.
Okay.
Yeah. And I guess that's 2 words, but
but that played out so beautifully, like with like coming to one-on-one and things like that.
Yeah. In some ways, in other ways, I'm like, did I really nail that one last year? But I think, you know, the last 6 months has been a really difficult time in my business. And the pivot really was, I think, you know, halfway through the year, I basically decided to let go of the business that I had built, of helping primarily new business owners, basically letting go of what at that point was 80% of my business to make the shift towards what I'm doing now, which is helping established business owners scale and grow. And also, along with that, which happened several months later, like winding down our group program that we'd been running for the last almost 3 years now, and completely changing the business model. And all of that has felt very divinely guided for me. I am a deep man of faith. I have, I would say I'm more spiritual than religious. I love all religions, but I'm not really particularly religious, but I do have a very deep connection to God. And to me, that direction was very much a calling. And it was something that I knew I needed to do. And yet there was also this, and there has been for the past half a year, this part of my mind that has just been fighting the whole thing. And like, no, why are we doing this? You literally blew up a very profitable business. And being grounded for me, in faith, in listening and trusting that inner voice, even when my rational mind is like, this doesn't make any sense. Why are we doing this? Like, you were doing great. We were growing super profitably. Why did we let go of all that? And just coming back again and again and again to deep listening and deep trust and surrender and faith. That's been the lesson for me through this period. And it's been a practice, but I'm also really excited. And so it's been really cool to see, just in walking that for the past 6 months, how something new is like being born, and to start to see some of the new clients that I've had the great privilege of working with today, and the new people who are coming on board, and the transformations that are happening in this kind of new space, helping folks who are more established. And I just feel super excited about what's to come, but there still is very much that daily dance between faith and fear. So that's a reminder for me. And I think that word represents like the real grounding into faith and trust of listening to that voice.
I got chills when you were saying that. I think the dance between faith and fear, that's being human. That's being an entrepreneur. So what a great word. I heard you say trust and surrender, and that's what came up for me when you were saying that. And I feel like that's just the dance we're always playing, right? How do we come back to trust? How do we both trust and surrender at the same time, which feels, I think, a bit dichotomous, but it's the whole thing. And as you were speaking, I don't know if this will land for you, but I think so often, like looking back on certain things in my business or life, like those things where we like think we blew something up, like so often we have to clear things out to make room for something bigger and better. And so I hear you just knowing that and trusting that, and
totally.
Just such a good word, such a good word.
When I was, it was 2020, I think I was working with one of my best friends as a director of sales, helping scale his coaching business. So I was basically an employee in his company. And one day he called me up on the phone. It was like 5 minutes before a team meeting. And he was like, Jason, this is not working. You're fired. And this was a month before we were about to move to Colorado, my partner, Kimberly, and I. And it was like everything in the course of a day just got turned upside down. And it was a very challenging period of time, but that was really the beginning of stepping into the work that I do today. I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that crumbling, because I look at what's happened in this moment today and what has been because of letting go of that. And I'm so much happier, and I'm doing work that's so much more aligned, and I'm really grateful for that experience too. So I think it's important to remember that. And I appreciate the reminder that it's in the death, there's a rebirth, and like there's both things are true. Like you can't have one without the other. One door closes, another opens.
Like always, every good thing I have in my life is been born on the death of something else, or something else crumbling or going away. I think about that with my dad's business and career, but literally every good thing I have in my life, I think about like my marriage, I think about where I live, I think about my business. All of it is because of other things that had to crumble and go away. And I look back and I am, not to say for everybody you have to have stuff crumble and fall apart to have good stuff, but I think that is also evolution. Like that's what we do as business owners, right? We're always kind of shedding the skin and creating something new. So yeah, just really seeing you in that though, because I think it is so easy for us as humans. And I think our like want for comfort and safety is to cling on to what isn't working, right? The bad relationship or marriage, the business model we don't like, the career we hate, the place we live in that we don't want to be in, just because it feels familiar and safe and like the status quo, until it essentially kicks us out. And you didn't do that. So I think that just takes a lot of bravery. So I don't know. I think that's a testament to who you are.
I appreciate you sharing that. So I'm curious if you have any closing thoughts as we wind down. Any closing thoughts you want to share with our listeners? And then I'd love for you to share a little bit more about where people can find you if they want to learn more about the work that you do and connect with you.
Closing thoughts. Oh, it always feels like such a big, like, what's the thing I'm going to leave you with?
Well, let me ask you a more specific question, because that's a useless question as a coach. I'm like, that is such a broad question. If there's one lesson or one takeaway that you can give our listener who is coming into 2025, thinking about growing their business, one thing to focus on and think about, maybe one question to ask themselves to help guide that heading into the new year, what would that be?
Okay, I'm going to give you more than one thing, because a couple of things came up when you said that. The first thing, when you asked your original question, the thought I have for everybody that I want to leave you with, this actually feels really important, and I feel like it's based on everything we're talking about. I lost my dad almost 5 years ago now, and my dad was like my hero in every way, and he had a beautiful career. And one of the things I noticed when he had his last months is, like, literally his clients flew in from around the world to see him because he was a coach and had built these relationships with them. And it just reminded me of how short our life is, and whatever you want in your business, like, our every day is such a gift. It sounds so fucking cheesy, but like, gosh, like, please choose yourself and go after it this year, because you don't know how many days you've got. But also, when you choose to build relationships and care about your work and care about service and just care about what you're doing, like, that will give you the things that you will have a life of no regrets, that when you're on your literal deathbed, the people who matter fly in, and that is going to matter. My dad made tons of money, but that mattered more than the money he had in the bank. And so, yes, scale smarter, not harder. But if you can follow that part of you and use that in all of the noise in the online space, that will lead you to money, that will lead you to success. But like, we're all wanting a life of no regrets. And then in terms of just like something a little more practical and tangible with what we were talking about differentiating. We were talking about not hiding in plain sight. We were talking about owning your work. We're talking about profitability. This all comes from the same place. I really would love to invite everybody to just stop and pause, take 20 minutes and think about, what are your values? What do you believe to be true? How can you dare yourself to share more of that vulnerably with a little bit of strategy behind it, strategically vulnerably? That is going to be the ticket to standing out and making more money in 2025.
Love it. Super powerful. Thank you for sharing that. So where can folks find you if they want to connect with you online?
Yeah. If you want to find me online, I've got a Facebook group, Business Besties and Creative Bosses. And I'm actually most active on Instagram right now, which is my name, at my name.
Great. We'll add those links as well if you're watching on YouTube, in the description down below. If you're listening to the episode on Apple Podcasts, that will be also in the description. So we'll have access to all those you can go check out. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you just showing up and being a light in the business world. It's been really cool to get to follow your journey for the past few years, and you've got so much wisdom to share. So I would encourage all of the listeners to go check out your masterclass, and just super grateful for you being here today. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad we connected. I will reflect that right back to you. You are such a light, and that is often rare in, I think, our online space, and you're the real deal. And I just really appreciate you and the friendship and for having me. So thank you.